I want to talk a little bit about our topic area this semester, which is magazine design. And magazine design is going to be a bit different than most of the design you look at and most of the design that you have interacted with. And that's become particularly true as more and more reading gets done online. And the online experience of reading just creates a very different sort of experience and very different sorts of limitations on what the designer can and cannot do. So I want to actually, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at GQ, both the website and the physical magazine on screen, and talk about some of the differences in approach to design. So this is GQ's homepage, and it's a fairly attractive homepage. It has what a homepage needs to have, which is a logo, a little bit of navigation up at the top for maneuvering, and a stream of the latest articles on topics that would be of interest to a GQ reader. Um, and it even has a little bit of interactivity. We're looking at a slideshow, but this, if you were to go to the actual GQ site and you were to click on that, it would sort of spin around a little bit. But what it doesn't have is, and it might be a very nicely branded website, it might be attractive, it might be a number of things, but what it doesn't do is allow for any sort of intimate connection between the typography and the design and the content. So for example, if we were to go back to GQ on another day, there's another day. We see that the structure and formats are all the same. So the main story, the story they're featuring, is still in that white type against the black bar. And we see the same stream of articles down the side. So the content changes, but the inside doesn't particularly. And do we have another one of them? Yes, we do. It's a food story, and so we've had a fashion story. And we had what was that first one? An interview. All of those are being treated exactly the same in terms of how they are visually handled. And the same gets true. Oh, and then the other thing uh, about the web is ads often can interrupt the experience. Ads can be a distraction on the web. In print, if you have a two-page spread of a magazine and the ad shows whatever it shows, it does not particularly distract you from the content. The two act in harmony. Let's go to this. And this is a typical article page for GQ. A lot of websites have a couple of formats for articles, one for sort of shorter ones, one for more featured ones. And I think GQ is included in that. But we'll see the same thing here on this content page. We have a photo, and it is the size the photo is. The ad is the size the ad is. And the headline is here in the corner with the author name and a little author portrait. And another article, and these are obviously a couple years old now, is treated exactly the same. So that was an entertainment story. This is a political story, but their format is exactly the same. And the reason for that is most publications have what are called CMS websites. So that stands for Content Management System. So essentially, these all have what's called a back end, where the editors and writers enter information and maybe edit it and correct it and upload pictures. And this all gets essentially put into what is a database. And under one category of the database, it says headline, and another category, it says author. And then if there's a little bit of bigger text, this would be a deck to a magazine designer, sort of the subhead. Not every website allows for a subhead. And then there'd be one for the main body of the article. And so what happens when you go to one of these websites is when you click on it, on an article, it summons all that material out of the particular database cells, and it pairs it with an ad, and that ad might be one that is not always associated with that ad. It might well be associated with you. It may be because you clicked on a product at Amazon, and so, but you didn't buy it, and so you're now seeing ads for that product because you expressed a little bit of interest in it, or you participated in something on Facebook, and so because these sites use cookies or what are sometimes called tracking pixels, it's putting an ad on that site that is targeted at you, or at least a little bit more targeted based on what you've done on that site and done on other sites. But it's all kind of assembled on demand, and it just flows into these templates. Now, a graphic designer may very well, and I do this sort of thing for my publication, have made this. This is probably an inside job at the magazine, as someone put together the little flames on former President Trump's eyes and combined it with those little bitty planets. So it's not that designers aren't necessarily involved in imagery and decisions for the website, but it is that these suites of decisions, how the logo looks, how big it is, what these typefaces are, these get made once, and the magazine lives with them until it eventually updates its website, as magazines tend to do every once in a while. And there's another one. We get to a sports or sneaker story, and again, all of the decisions are the same except that they are arranged, except that the content is different. And here is, just another page. 24 best restaurants in America, and I just want to show you this one because we will be coming back. And I think this is GQ's other standard format for articles, for their long form format. And so this has the bigger headline rather than the little headline. But I want to directly compare how this was presented online and in print. So a magazine is very different, and in the middle of our current circumstances, it's a little bit harder, I think, than usual to talk about magazines. I know that not everyone lives in a house where magazines are common. My house is full of magazines. I have something like 12 different subscriptions. But magazines, I hope you have some around or could find some. I normally sign the purchase of a couple of magazines for this class, in addition to other things, and I'm not doing that this semester because I don't want to expose people needlessly, but I hope you are in a place where you are around some magazines. But you'll note that magazines all have covers, and in this class we'll be designing some magazine covers. And covers are kind of like a unique part of a magazine in that they really function not as the magazine's package. When you go to a magazine store, you would see this on the rack, and basically these are all giving you reasons to buy this magazine. So if you want to dress like a badass, you say, maybe if I buy that magazine, I will learn how to dress like a badass. Or if you're interested in Robert Pattinson, you might say, I wonder what's going on with Robert Pattinson. And so those are all reasons to buy the magazine. And just like any other packaging, it also has a UPC, or Universal Product Code, on it so that it could be checked out by a cashier. Now, the other thing magazines have, well, this is a table of contents, is they all tend to have a pacing to them, in that they tend to start with shorter pieces, sort of quicker hits, easier in and out type reading, and then they tend to move into longer, more feature-like writing towards the end of the magazine. And then some magazines also put a final section of short items in the back. Not every magazine does that, but that's sort of the traditional approach. So a magazine has basically a arc to it, where you have small items and you have longer items and then longest items, and then you're done. It's sort of like your appetizer course before your main course at dinner. The appetizers tend to be tastier and richer and smaller, but they get you ready for the big meal. Also, magazines tend to have tables of contents. These are probably among the most ignored pages in magazines. Most people just flip through magazines. They don't bother these, but there are important reasons for the magazine business, for magazines themselves, for reasons we'll get into as we design our own tables of contents. So here's an example of short items, and we have several items on one page. This is just a little sort of preliminary section called GQ HQ, what's going on at the World of GQ. And it has, you can see a variety of art. Now, all of those web things we looked at, that's one picture on a page. Maybe if you scroll down, there's another picture. But basically, with most CMSs, what you get is one picture. With a page like this in a magazine, you could have multiple pictures, multiple sizes, and multiple styles. So these look sort of illustrate, well, that's certainly illustrated, and those are black and white photographs, those are color photographs. We have this little badge here breaking the frame, and so we could get like a little bit of interaction, and you'll note that these are different sorts of stories. So these are new people at GQ. This is sort of a interview. Here's something about their last cover. With reader reactions. So all of these things, this is kind of a interview with a list format. All of these can interact happily together on a magazine page. Now, that shortness is also one of the powers of magazines that websites don't have. If you were to click on a story, if you were to click on a link, and the text that came out was this short, and you had the ads, and you had to wait for it to load, and you had to do all those things, you might think that was a bit of a letdown, to just get this little bit of story. And so for that reason, I think magazine writing often tends to be shorter and pithier and smarter than website writing. Website articles often go on just too long and are not edited tightly enough. So then we get into that section I was talking about. I guess we already sort of were, with items that are shorter and easier. And so this is their front of the book section, and it has a name called Manual, and that's typical. Everyone in this class will be designing a section like this that has multiple small items. And so this is just sort of a look at watches. So we look at 4 watches, and it tells us about them and how to buy them if we wanted to. And there's a little bit of a caption there as well. Now, the other thing is, because each page is different, and this is all one issue of one magazine, I should say, and here I think the M is for manual, every page can and really should look different. It doesn't have that website, you pour the content into the container and everything looks the same. Every page can be a reflection of the content. And so for a lot of articles on the web, a designer doesn't even have to read them or see them. I mean, the editor is sometimes just picking a wire photo or picking an image to go with them, and it doesn't really have any designer involvement, at least after the website is launched. For a lot of articles anyway. But here, a fair amount of design time went into making that collage. And here, if we look at the bottom, I don't think I can zoom in. Oh, I can zoom in on it. We can see that the type is treated in a way that responds to the words. So if you don't know the names of Assemi, Fear of God, and Heron Preston, you're missing out on a whole new definition of luxury. So those are all design decisions, is to emphasize that type like that. And to do that, you really have to, read the type. Every article has a structure and a rhythm to it, and brings stuff up, and to illustrate that article effectively, to create a user experience, you have to know what that content is. There's the next page, and we see here This is GQ Intelligence. That's one of their front of the book sections, a bunch of small items. Not all of these stories are in sort of linear read from the top, go to the bottom format. So this is a bunch of quotes from different people and a collage of photographs of those people. This is kind of a chart where the meaning of what these, where these things are is, it's sort of, you can barely see a little bit of line. There's sort of a connection to these. It's not a article where you stop at the top of the page and go to the bottom. And some articles are really just no more than quotes. This, by magazine standards, is an article, and it's just a quote from Diddy. That's all it is. But if it adds wit or humor or value to the reader's life, that's fine. And this page is valuable because there's a bunch of other different things on it and a bunch of different ways of presenting the information. And then magazines also have what are called feature stories. And we'll look at just a couple of these. This is, again, all just one issue of this GQ. And this is a story about Robert Patterson, and we can see this kind of interesting interaction of type and background with this sheet. And for magazines that are interested in fashion, like GQ or Vanity Fair, a lot of times an article is doing double duty. It is a magazine about the celebrity or an interview with them, but it's also a fashion shoot. So this person is wearing a coat and pants, and it's telling us where we could buy that stuff and how much we pay for it. But we look at this, and this might be a typeface that magazine is never using again. Might be just for that one article, and it gives that magazine a unique kind of branded look within the magazine. Another feature in this magazine, America's QB. This is type probably created by hand or with a combination of hand and digital. Again, a look that would not be repeated in this magazine. And you could see the colors are being picked up from the photograph. It's a very dramatic and really beautiful photograph. But the colors from that are being picked up. So there's this connection between content and type and design that you can get with paper that's just not really possible with a website. Or, I mean, I guess it's possible with a website, but it's really not practical with a CMS website. And then next to last one of these we will look at, same magazine, Making of Dylann Roof, and we show the sort of mazy approach to how this person got to be the way they are. And the other thing that features have is, in addition to these openers, which I think of as kind of like a billboard for the feature, this is like, it's almost like an advertisement for the feature. You'll note that the articles that these features are, none of them actually start on the opener. Sometimes an article does start on the opener, but in this case, none of them do. And we can go back to the next page. But we can see that some of those design elements that are introduced on the opening, including the kind of typewritery typeface and this mazy approach to the drop cap, are picked up on. And so this becomes almost a branded feature within the magazine because these elements are introduced and then taken away as we cycle through different stories. And again, a layout like this, multi-columns, multiple pictures, you just could not have this kind of interaction or immersive experience with most CMS websites. And I talked a little bit about and then fashion spreads. This is an article really just about clothing, and so the only text that we need at all is how much the suit costs and where do we buy it. So let's go back to this page. See if I can get that a little better. So I talked about, the experience of reading online changes not just the experience of reading, but it also changes how things can be done. So this is that page I already showed you, the 24 best restaurants in the most unexpected places. Now, I want you to notice that headline. That headline is written with sort of long specific words in mind. So we know it's a list, 24 best restaurants. We know it's about restaurants. And part of that is that for search engines use headlines to tailor results to someone when they're searching for information on the article. And so web headlines tend to be longer than print headlines, and they tend to have a lot more information in them. Print headlines tend to be a little bit shorter, quite a bit shorter. And so here is that same article, how it's presented in print. And we have a little bit of wordplay in the headline. We have the neon sign, but the B in beaten is broken. So we could read this as off the beaten path or off the eaten path. And it's sort of like a visually witty. And you just could not do this on the internet. There's no way that a search engine would recognize any of that. So the headlines become longer on web, and they tend to be shorter and usually much more clever in print. Because I'm not trying to get traffic from a search engine. So those are some of the big differences with magazine and web design. You're going to have to sort of engage and think about content, and maybe even rewrite a few headlines to make them more print appropriate. And what we'll do is we're going to do basically these projects that I have showed you. There'll be a table of contents. There will be a brief section, or designers often call it FOB or FOB, and that just stands for front of the book, because the shorter items tend to be in the front of the book. And everyone will do a table of contents and a couple of covers, and we will explore the possibilities of print and long form design.